Now that you know more about graphing, you have enough tools to determine whether a relation really is a function just by using this graph. First, recall that a relation is a function if for every value of x there is one and only one value of y associated with it. Now, the way that this will apply to graphing is that we can take our graph, choose a value for x, and see what values of y are related to that value of x. Essentially, this gives us a great test of testing whether the graph really is that of a function. And what we're looking for is if every time we give it an input of x, if it really does go to only one output of a y. Now, if it goes to more than one output of a y, then we know that it essentially is not a function. Now, this essentially works really great because you're testing all of the inputs to seeing how many outputs each of them go to. This visual testing of inputs and outputs is known as the vertical line test. And when we see it visually, I think you'll see why. Here I have a graph, and I want to determine whether it really is a function or not. So I imagine choosing some sort of input, like say a 4. And I check to see what associated output it has with that 4. And from my graph, it looks like about a negative 3.5. Well, since that's only one output for my one input, that's a pretty good indication that this might be a function. And if I go through testing all the other possible inputs, I can again see that they only go to one output. Visually, here's how that looks. So when I start with that input, I imagine like a vertical line. And what I'm checking is, does it only cross in one spot? Now, if I take that vertical line and I decide to move it anywhere else on the graph, again, I only want to make sure that it crosses in one spot. Now, if no matter where I put this graph, it only crosses once, then I can be sure that this really is a function. If I ever find a spot where it crosses more than once, then it is not a function. Let's now see a few examples of graphs and use the vertical line test to determine whether each one is a function or not. You may want to pause the video at certain points before I give the answer to each of these. Let's start with my first example. So this one's basically a horizontal line around 3. Take a vertical line and see if it only crosses in one spot. Now, no matter where I put this vertical line, you'll notice that it indeed only crosses in one spot. Therefore, it really is a function. All right, let's take another one. This one is basically an ellipse. Well, this turns out not to be a function. When I put a vertical line on this one, I notice that it crosses in two different spots. Since I have one input that goes to more than one output, it is definitely not a function. Let's try another one. Here I have another line. Do you think this one's a function or not? This one is a function. No matter where I put my vertical line, it only crosses in one spot. This one's pretty tricky for a lot of my students. But think carefully about that vertical line and try and determine whether this one is a function. This one is a function. Even though you could take a horizontal line and it would cross in two spots, we're not really concerned with horizontal lines. That's why it is known as the vertical line test, straight up and down. And no matter where you put that vertical line, it will only cross once. Here's a nice curvy one. Is this one a function? Well, I think the y-axis gives this one away. You can find a spot where it actually crosses 3 times. Definitely more than once. Therefore, this one is not a function. All right, one last one, and you may have to think about this one a little bit harder. Do you think this line that goes straight up and down is a function? Well, it turns out that this one is not a function. And it may be a little bit more difficult to see, but remember, basically we're taking a vertical line and seeing if it crosses in more than one spot. Now, since it already is a vertical line, if I put another vertical line right on top of it, well, then it crosses in lots of different spots, essentially an infinite number of places. Well, that's definitely more than once. Therefore, a line that goes straight up and down is not a function.